Hey y'all, it's Sarah. I have a super easy Christmas craft for you guys. I know some people are still a little leery about jumping off into this, but it is starting to get kind of the crafty time of year. So I wanted to give you something that was kind of a beginner's craft, but still cute enough that even if you're already into this, I think you might like it too. So I'm going to show you really quick what I'm using. If you're not familiar, most of my crafts use the Readi-board brand foam core sheeting. This is something that you find in like office supply and school supply area next to poster board. This one is in a 20-inch by 30-inch sheet. I'm going to be using this particular gift bag from Walmart. I believe it was around maybe $3. I'm going to be using a couple of paints here. So these are my go-to colors. There's a lot of tutorials for the painting and kind of really picking out a faux wood look that fits your project. So those are always separate, but I am going to try to run through it quickly on this video since this is such an easy craft. And to do that, these are my favorite three to get the wood look that I like, which is typically the salvage barnwood look that I use. So the Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, which is their name for black, Waverly wax clear, and Waverly wax and antique. So there is a video on my whole little setup if you're interested in that. But I'm going to briefly jump through the painting process. It won't be as detailed as what it is in the actual paint tutorials, since this is more about putting together a super simple craft. Okay, that's pretty much all we're going to need. The one thing I want to say is that my foam core sheet, I have cut it down into 3 inches. I keep lots of strips at 3 inches, and the main reason that even started for me is this. This is the ruler that I typically use, and you see it's a 3-inch ruler. That's kind of how I got started on this, the use of the 3 inches, and it works out for a lot of things that I like to do at the scale I like to do, so I've kind of stuck with it. You could start this out with 1-inch strips if you wanted to, because all we're needing is pieces to frame this out. So if you wanted to go ahead and begin cutting yours out at this 1-inch width, the reason that I didn't just do that is I find it easier to paint a 3-inch width than I do a whole bunch of 1-inch ones. And I just go ahead and paint out what I need. I can cut them down. I do have to take extra caution because once we've painted this surface, it does have a tendency to want a lift, to lift up a little bit on you. So be aware of that. I've got just a few strips out here, and this really is going to boil down to a personal use. So I kind of pulled some out. I'm actually probably only going to need 2, but this is a craft as I go kind of craft that I wanted to do, and if I was doing it, I thought I would see if anybody else might be interested. So we'll see how many we actually need after I play with the look, and show you some ideas, and that way you can kind of customize that to what you need to. Okay, really quick to get started. One thing I want to point out is you guys can probably see this ugly painted strip of foam core here. I did not intentionally paint it. This is residual. This is my kind of cheat that I use if I'm going to be doing multiple of my strips. And I always cut mine at 30 inches because you don't get a lot of the waviness in it from the actual foam center. So I go at the 30-inch. I've got a strip here. I've got a strip down here on this other end, and then one at the base of my desk that holds all these pieces in place. And if you can't glue things to your desk, which I know a lot of people don't want to do that to their surface, get a large piece of cardboard, any kind of cardboard, break a box down, flatten it out. And this is a really nice setup to do a whole bunch of these at one time without a lot of fuss and headache. It's very simple. I could have lined up several more on this strip. Okay, so to dive into this, I'm going to go ahead and get my gloves out. I am not going to do a lot of distressing on my pieces because they're going to end up being frames. And 2 of mine actually may not end up being used at all. But I do find it easier to paint a whole bunch of them at once. So I'm just taking this tool, and you can see mine's been around for years. This came in a 3-pack from Michael's, maybe, Hobby Lobby. I cannot remember. But I believe they were for molding clay, things like that. This is the one that I use to do my little wormholes. I've been asked about that recently, and that's what these are. And I've had mine for years. I did not know if they were even still available. Someone did find these, but they're not necessary. You can really use anything that you can kind of work into this foam surface. These just happen to be very handy for it, and they have a nice thickness to them. Okay, so I've gone in, I've put a little gouging, a little distressing. I'm going to come in with my fingernail. And guys, I have gel, so mine are able to go down into this foam really nicely. I'm going to pop that surface right off the bat with the sharpest edge of my nail. And it breaks into that so that we're not getting a lot of wrinkling and creasing. If you just put kind of straight pressure down, you want to pierce that surface a little bit as you go. And I'm not going to do a lot of these on here simply for the fact that this is going to be frame pieces. That's probably about all I will do for mine. The next thing I'm going to do is with the 3 paints that I mentioned, I have mixed a little bit of all 3, mostly antique, just a tiny bit of the black and a tiny bit of the clear. And I keep this mix, and you see I actually label it as my little mix. This is what I do my edges with because it's got a little of the brown, it's got a little of the black in this mixture. So no matter kind of which wood grain look that I go for, it'll kind of blend in. So this is what I use to do my edges. And you just play with the mixed consistency. I use a popsicle stick, mix it all together, and that's about all I do. So I'm going to come in with my kitchen sponge. I like this one for this job because these edges are really sharp. It can cut right into your sponge. And I'd rather do that with the kitchen sponge than I would my bath sponge. So all I'm going to do is come down here, hit these edges. I've got a whole lot of crafts that I hope to do today. We've had lots and lots of thunder and rain today. So it is a crafty kind of day. On all of your ends, you want to do kind of as even of a coat as you can get on this foam edge. So that means the 2 ends here and your sides. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and give them a moment to dry. Okay, so you can see I've got all the edges done, and I had quite a bit of paint seepage. I do not want to let that dry. I want to hurry up and kind of start blending that out. And that one's actually on my back side, so that one's not a big deal, but this side has some. And the tighter you squeeze these when you're doing your edges, the less you'll get that. I'm coming in with my brown sponge that I have, it's still saturated with the antique color. It stays in a Ziploc so that I can kind of keep it that way. So I just want to blend those out right off the bat. I made a pretty big mess with it. I tend to do that with my gloves because I can't tell where I've got paint on them. But no worries, we're going to blend all of this in. So this is a slightly darker color than our antique, and you're about to see that. I'm coming in with my antique color. There's nothing else added to this. It is just straight antique. I'm kind of brushing that off. I don't want it too heavy. So I'm going to come in where I've got my distressing. I've pushed some of that paint down in there. And you can kind of see the difference in these two colors in there, hopefully. This other color wasn't necessary. It just makes it, instead of doing brown down my side, then black down my sides to get my edges to match this particular look, it's just a whole lot easier to have that mix ready to go. So if you notice, I'm not having to hold on to my boards with this little thing here or my little strip. I can kind of leave them in place, use my fingers, work my grain look across really easily. It's a whole lot easier for me than trying to hold on to it and then steadily cleaning my fingerprints off. So that's about all the coverage that I'm going to do for this. And there is a detailed video, and I'll try to make sure that it's linked below, of getting this kind of look that I'm going for. So I'm going to slide that out of the way. Now I'm going to come in with my ink color and my clear. And if you notice, I end up mixing these the way that I dip my sponges. So I have a clear for each one. That way I don't get it too crazy. So I'm going to come in with my sponge. And I'm not getting a whole lot of the ink color. That has the pigment in it. And the clear is what lets us lay that pigment down in a translucent stain-like appearance. So the more of this color that you add, the heavier the pigment, the less transparent you get. So you end up with a darker, almost paint-like coverage. I want to hit a couple other topics. Some of you have asked in the Peppermint Cactus group page, what happens if you end up getting it too dark? Now, in this instance, I could just come back in with a clean dry sponge, wipe some of that down. If you catch it right then, you can come in with more wax, dilute that down. And you can see the more I work that in, now that I've added that wax in, the more translucence you get. Now you're seeing those browns underneath there. Now, if this was still too dark for you, come in with your dry sponge, pull that across, and you can see how much that improved it. Same thing can be done if you've already let it dry a little bit. You're not going to get much lift. And if you think about it in regards to like hair coloring and the levels of color lift that you would get if you bleached your hair, it's kind of the same way on this. You may only get a shade or two lighter if it's already dried on your surface and then you come back and think, oh, that's a little too dark for me. You can go back over with the clear wax and it's going to lift a little of that. Use the clear wax and the dry kind of sponge concept on that. And it'll lift some of that color back for you. So I wanted to address that. While I was thinking about it, it had just been recently asked. So now I'm just making sure that I've got a decent amount of color down in all the little spots where I put my gouges and my knot holes. I don't want any white in those little surfaces. Now, I really like the mix of these tones where I've got them here. So, I'm going to put these to the side for your knot holes. I can typically do it with the head of my sponge here, or I can do it with my fingertip. This is also a really good way using one of like the Dollar Tree makeup wedges. A lot of people wonder why my knot holes have like kind of their own shading and shadowing and dimension to them. So I typically will come in, tap that in, and then blend it back out a little bit. So it keeps some of that color that I just tapped in, but not all of it. And you can do the same thing with this if you're a little nervous about doing it with something this large of a surface. You can tap it in with your finger and then blend it out with your sponge. I've gotten pretty good about feeling my way through. It's a little harder when I'm wearing gloves, but whatever way feels comfortable to you, that you feel like you can have control of that look. But that's kind of where my shadowing and my shading comes in. You can do the same thing around some of your other gouges. Okay, so these are going to dry, and I'm going to be cutting mine down to the 1-inch strip size. That is what ultimately that I'm going to frame out my piece with. So they're going to be 1-inch sizes, and we'll still have to come back in and do some of the edges because there will be fresh cuts. So keep that in mind. If you go this route and cut them down after painting like I do, or if you decide to cut them the other way. Okay, so here I am now back with my gift bag. And the one thing I've already done is I already kind of stole the other side of this bag. So I pretty much just have one side. I'm leaving this right here intact. And I'm going to try to do my best to trim pretty evenly. We are going to make this look kind of like a scroll art that I've seen before. I don't really know what they call that. I would have to try to find a name for it, but it's going to be kind of like we've got a scroll going here. Okay, so I've come in with my really long ruler. I've got my regular razor blade that I use for pretty much everything else, and I'm going to try to cut this side section off and get it as flush with that crease as I possibly can. And if you can't, that's okay. You can customize this size to whatever you want. There's actually a little wiggle room here. If you look, there's quite a bit of space here and on this side where you could trim this down to a size you wanted. I actually did the other side as just a framed piece of art, but given the paper style of this bag, it is a very paper material. It doesn't have the shine and sheen on the top of it like the other bags that almost seem like they're waxed. So it really kind of leaned me a different way. So I wanted to try it this way too, while I was playing with ideas today in the rain. And I'm sure that's pretty cute. You could probably find something to do with that. I know I typically try before I toss things away. So now I'm at this stage. All I have left is just my bag. And I haven't cut this bottom off. And there's a reason why. I wanted to show you a couple things. If you wanted to get a little extra length out of this. So I cut my strips down. I only ended up needing, really you only need about 4 inches for the way that I'm going to go. But I did want to kind of show you that if you found a bag that kind of did not want to lay flat, you can try ironing that out or using a dryer or a heat gun to flatten it. But I wanted to show you a couple options on that. What I'm actually going to be doing is I am down to just needing 4 strips because my bag ended up cutting up nicely. I feel like it's going to hang nicely. I've already kind of trimmed 2 of them down, and then I'm going to trim the back side. But I wanted to show you, you can do it this way and have a little extra length down here, which is what I may do. Either which way works. You can come up just above that, just below it, however you kind of want to do that. We're not even going to frame this side. That's what I meant about it kind of looks like a scroll. So I've got one for top and bottom, and you may wonder where the other one's for. So when you go to do this, to weight that down just a little more, I'm going to add the kind of faux wood strips to both sides of my sheet. You could have only just painted these 2 guys down, put flat white ones on the back, but I actually wanted mine to look wood from both directions. So I think I'm going to be happy without having the extra length, but I did want to show you how to add the extra length. I wanted to show you a couple other options with your larger pieces. If you have a bag that does not want to weigh down, it doesn't want to lay really well, you can always come in on this back side with these couple extra strips that I painted out. I'm going to use as an example. Come in on the back side, apply it to there, and then use your smaller strip on the front. Just be sure to cut very flush along here, and that'll help weight it down some for you. Because I know sometimes these things can end up really losing their shape. I'm not having that problem, but I wanted to show you ways that you could kind of address that problem if it came up. So really simple. I told you guys this was such an easy one. I almost felt guilty showing it, but I know there are some people that want super easy. This bag, the material, this paper parchment like material, this bag just made this a fun idea to me. So the first thing I want to do is, before I glue anything down, I am working with white. I'm going to cut my strips down, and then we're going to need to paint out these edges before we attach and glue them. So in order to cut my strips down, I pretty much just match them up to my bag. Whatever it ends up being, if you come in a little tighter here, you're going to have a different dimension than mine. But I think mine ran about 20 inches maybe. Correct. Mine were at 20 inches. And that's just what my bag ended up being cut out at. You could possibly end up with 19, 18, however you cut that down. I wanted to show you really quick how these little kind of bumpers that I've got on my desk help out in other ways. So my mat, I could have used my really small 12 by 12 mat from Dollar Tree, or this one and just lined it up here. But cutting these strips, I want to cut both of them at the same time to that 20 inches. I wanted to show you how this kind of helps out. It's got them wedged between each one of these. I've got it wedged down with my ruler. These are pretty small. They tend to want to slide and move on you. I'm going to be able to do this and cut both of them, and it didn't slide or shift on me any direction. So that helps out if you're doing multiple cuts. There's a bonus to it for that. Okay, so I've got everything prepped. I made sure I cleaned up all my paint because I'm working with white, and I always struggle with that. My last step is pretty easy. I'm leaving my handle. You can take the ribbon off if you want to. Leave it on as an extra detail. We're going to use that as kind of our hanger kind of look. This one is a, I don't know, it's almost like a spun paper, raffia-like material around this. I'm going to come in here real quick, flip this over, and you can see what I mean about be careful where your paint is. And just using regular Dollar Tree hot glue sticks, that is my favorite with this, especially on something that's got a paper this thin. You have to worry about your more wet glues buckling paper. The wetter the glue, the more moisture that's in it, and the more likely it can warp and buckle and bubble your paper. So I'm going to try really fast to get this to slide down into the place that I want it. And I'm trying to pull it straight down to this edge. I didn't get good paint or good glue adhesion here, so I'm going to tuck in there. Sure, you can see where we're going with this. I'm going to do the same thing on this top section, hoping I'm not getting in any paint. And you wouldn't even have to do this back side. I told you guys this was so easy, but it really is cute. But this is helping me kind of weight my paper, straighten my paper, hide any buckling or issues with the edges of my paper. Especially if you didn't get it cut perfectly straight. And I'm just going to come here and try to make sure that I've got this alignment really nice. This is a good time if you wanted to come in, take a little bit of your paint that you did your edges with, and do right along here, because you can see this white paper through that if you don't get the alignment good. I'm relying on myself to hopefully get my alignment really good. I'm going to do the same thing on this end. When I said this was so simple, that was why I was able to go ahead and throw in some of the other details and information. This one is so easy. Make sure that's adhered really nicely. It's got a perfect little hanger at the top and the kind of scroll art look. You could always spread your hanger out. I had initially thought that I would come in and put a beaded hanger. I felt like it was a little too heavy for this paper-like scroll piece. But there you go. There is a whole project done super simple. And really, honestly, I didn't need as much as I showed you, but I wanted to show you guys some options if you could get this bag, but it wasn't in the best shape. How you could use those other pieces to do that. Mine didn't need it, and there you go. I hope you guys like it. I had fun with it. I do think it's cute, and if I don't get to talk to you later, I hope you get a chance to craft, and we'll talk soon.